Hi, this is Danny Ryan from Threewill. I'm the Vice President of Business Development, and I'm here with Pete Skelly. He's the Director of Technology for Threewill. And we're just covering today the 5 things you need to know about transforming full trust code to the cloud app model. I appreciate you writing this blog post, Pete.
Thanks, Danny.
Starting off, you hit a couple of acronyms. Tell me a little bit more about the acronyms that people need to know to get started with this subject.
So there's really 2 primary acronyms for the blog post that you want to be familiar with. First is Full Trust Code, or FTC. And Full Trust Code is really the old server-side way of doing things. So classic C#, and having essentially full trust on the server. So you had an assembly that was deployed to the server, might have been deployed to the GAC, for example. And the other is CAM, or Cloud Application Model. And so the Cloud Application Model is really the not just the SharePoint app model, but some additional ways of moving to the cloud and some of the patterns and practices you need to be aware of when developing cloud-based solutions.
Awesome. And so what I'd like to do next is just sort of go through the 5 things that you mentioned here, maybe add a little bit of light to them. The first one that you started off with was avoid the customization tax of declarative code. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So typically, if you're going to be declaring XML values and deploying your code using the old feature framework, what most people didn't do is take time to use the feature upgrades. And to be honest, it wasn't exactly the most robust and easy framework to use when you were trying to upgrade features. So typically what would end up happening is you'd accrue a bit of technical debt when trying to do those upgrades. You'd either deploy a brand new solution or try to do some things which weren't declarative. And in the end, you'd be writing code anyway. So a lot of times you might have gone through and created the XML files, created element.xml files, and deployed your code using features, which was the suggested model. It was what we knew back then, and what was suggested. But at this point, now you begin to essentially pay a tax. So every time you've got an update, you're going to have to find a way to make those changes. And either you're going to be coding them in the end anyway, or you're going to have to add and bolt on additional features, and it's just going to turn into a Franken feature over time.
Okay, gotcha. And so that's the next one that you have. I mean, you've mentioned this. I remember you talking about this before, which was transformation, not migration. I think I was saying migration a bunch, and you're like, no, let's say transformation instead. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear from Microsoft at this point that some of the things that you're going to have to learn, and this is true in my opinion at least for cloud app development in general, if you're going to take dependencies on external services or consume REST-based APIs, or you're going to basically push code into the cloud and have to deal with resiliency issues or compensation patterns, etc., you're going to have to transform code and not just kind of pick that code up and bolt it into another place. So migrating your code isn't necessarily the right thing to do. All too often folks kind of look at it and say, oh, well, I did an SP timer job as the canonical example in the old full trust world. Well, why can't I do that in the new world? And you really can't. You really need to consider, should that be a timer job at all? Should it be something that might be a workflow? Should it be a web job that runs in Azure or some other pattern? So you really need to consider what business problem you're trying to solve and what functionality you're trying to address, and transform that solution, not just migrate the existing code. And yes, that does mean you're probably going to have to rebuild some of these solutions, but we'll get to one of the other items, and you're going to have to just pick and choose some of these things and probably transform gradually.
Gotcha. You said that in the third one, you said that to control the provisioning process, that's a critical piece. Why is that?
Yeah, I think controlling the provisioning process is really the most critical portion or aspect of moving to the cloud app model. If you can begin to, in large provisioning scenarios, if you can begin to control that provisioning process, you're going to move away from having to pay that customization tax. You're going to be in a better situation. You're not going to have some of those files that are deployed that are dependent on features and that are using unghosted files. So if you learn to control the provisioning process, or you can take advantage of that and utilize the code to deploy your new assets, sites, master pages, any files, lists, content types, etc., you're going to be better off in the long run. And really what you're trying to do is isolate your maintenance and upgrade surface and reduce that customization tax.
Gotcha. The fourth one you have is to transform gradually. Tell me more about that one.
Yeah, we keep referring to that customization tax, and I think a lot of organizations today, they've made a significant investment in SharePoint. And so if you can control that provisioning process for your new sites, that's one way to kind of move towards the future. But if you've already got, a huge investment in SharePoint, say you've got thousands of site collections, you're probably not going to be able to move all that content really quickly. But you can do some things like use CSOM to actually create new elements and upgrade the existing content and move slowly over time. And you can do that in place. You're not, disrupting business. You're not losing business continuity. You're not impacting, your whatever ROI you're trying to get out of those older quote sites. So I think transforming gradually, really, you have to look for those greenfield projects to move to the cloud app model. But even if you have full trust code out there today that you can't completely remove from the existing farm, you can start to move that and actually move existing content to this new model. So you do have some options to move gradually.
And for greenfield means like a brand new project.
Brand new project.
It's just a brand,
yeah.
all your brand new projects look at leverage. Gotcha. The fifth one is finally because you can. Tell me more about that one.
Yeah, I think that's for a lot of our clients, working with some other developers and some of our clients, a lot of times people will ask, well, I can do this in full trust code and I can do this still using features. And even in the past, it's always been, at least from our perspective, just because you can doesn't mean you should. You've got to look at the business problem you're trying to solve, and with all the things that you can do in SharePoint, it's really trying to find those patterns and practices that the Office development team is pushing that'll make your life a little easier. If you're going to go to the cloud, great. Well, you need to have these models and patterns that are going to let you get those updates on a regular basis. You're trying to consume those services in a commodity fashion, so if you code yourself into a corner and can't get those updates, you've done yourself a disservice, right? So just because you can create a custom master page doesn't mean you should. Now, does that mean you should never do that? Probably not. There are cases where I would probably say, yes, go ahead and create a custom master page, or use some of the older patterns, but you've got to kind of look at it and be pragmatic in your approach. If you're going to be on-prem for a long time and you've got a huge investment, it may be worth keeping some of those things in place. So just because you can doesn't mean you should do those things. So it's really kind of looking at it and determining what you really want to do when you want to do it.
Gotcha. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to write this blog post and spending some time with me today. I wanted to, for all those listeners, I wanted to let you know that we are going to have an upcoming webinar in May of 2015. So please feel free to drop by our blog. I'll have more information on that webinar. If you want to see any of the webinars from Threewill, go to threewill.com/calendar, and I'll have a list of all of our webinars. Thanks again, Pete, for your time today, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.